Donald Trump says he wants every car sold in the U.S. to be made in the U.S.
If we don't make a deal with Canada, we're going to put a big tariff on cars, could be a 50 or 100%, because we don't want their cars.
The problems just seem to keep piling up for Chevrolet.
This year, Chevrolet and GMC's issues just seem to keep getting worse. You might want to reconsider, at least for the time being, if you now own a Chevy or are considering purchasing one. I'm about to tell you something that will make you furious, people. General Motors recently suffered a $5 billion loss. With a B, that's billion. The worst part is still to come. Tariffs that were intended to safeguard American jobs are to blame for this. These tariffs don't save jobs, have closed factories, ranging from Ontario to Detroit. Now, 50,000 employees are looking at pink papers and unsure if they will receive a payment at all the next month. In my 30 years of following the car industry, I have never witnessed anything like this. Here's why you should be concerned. There is more than one corporation involved in what occurred to GM. Every significant North American manufacturer might experience it, and it will strike you in the most painful spot if it does. How much your next car or truck will cost. Recall when politicians said that American manufacturing would return as a result of tariffs? They gave the impression that everything was easy. They didn't give you the unpleasant reality, though. Washington imposed a 25% tariff on imported vehicle parts back in April. The GM finance team realized almost immediately that they were in difficulty. In front of the shareholders, CEO Mary Barr was forced to acknowledge that this one choice could cost them up to $5 billion in profits this year. Take a moment to consider that. $5 billion. 10 brand new factories could be built with that much. For a year, it's sufficient to cover the salaries of 100,000 employees. Rather, it has vanished, consumed by a single tariff policy, and the mess is only getting started. You see, cars today aren't constructed the same way as those from the 1970s or 1980s. The majority of the parts were imported from the US or Canada back then. About 40% of the parts for today's Silverado or Escalade are imported, meaning that practically every truck that leaves GM's assembly lines has been subjected to this tariff hammer. I'll just give you one example. GM used to pay $28 for a steering knuckle. That same part cost $36 after tariffs. Multiply that by 30,000 distinct components now. They now charge an additional $3,200 for each truck they manufacture. Furthermore, GM will not simply accept that loss, let's face it. Can you guess who foots the bill? You and I, the customers, are correct. You may be thinking, all right. Perhaps it's worthwhile, if it keeps American employment safe. Here's the harsh truth, though. It hasn't. In reality, it's done the exact opposite. Detroit's Factory Zero. The centerpiece of America's manufacturing renaissance was intended to be this. They sent 200 staff home on April 11th. Everyone on the floor knew better than to cite slowing demand as the official explanation. They could see expenses getting out of hand. In late April, 200 workers were laid off at GM's Ingersoll facility in Ontario, which halted manufacturing until October. Suddenly, the Oshawa truck line stopped working overnight. 700 jobs have been lost. Furthermore, the harm did not end at the factory's entrance. According to a Michigan diner owner I spoke with, he lost 40% of his patrons almost immediately. These weren't only spreadsheet figures. Before their shifts, these were the men that arrived each morning for coffee. Those shifts are no longer available. I was informed by an Indiana auto parts shop owner that he is considering reducing his workforce by half. These are family-run companies that have weathered the pandemic, gas crises, and recessions. However, they are being crushed by this. We were concerned for decades that American workers would suffer as a result of globalization. We're now studying the consequences of the pendulum swinging too far in the opposite direction, and right when you think it. Even worse is the issue with electric vehicles. GM embraced electric vehicles. They invested billions in the development of Ultium batteries. To make even, they had to sell 100,000 electric Silverados annually. However, the federal $7,500 EV tax credit was later revoked by Congress. Critical battery minerals were subject to tariffs and costs abruptly skyrocketed. This year, GM is now only projecting 65,000 sales. What the heck? What about the others? At Factory Zero, they are seated beneath plastic covers. Unsold Silverados at $45,000 each were stacked in rows, their batteries deteriorating in the summer heat. It's similar to slow-motion money burning. This is where the larger issue lies. Economics is no longer the only factor in this conflict. The basic foundation of organized labor is being torn apart. Tariffs are being praised by UAW President Shah, who claims that they finally prioritize American jobs. Unifor in Canada, meantime, is incensed and claims that GM exchanged Canadian jobs for political points in Tennessee. I have witnessed union rooms where employees who have been standing side by side on picket lines for decades are unable to look one another in the eye. Cut the damn tariffs, is what some people who earlier favored tariffs are saying as their mortgage bills keep piling up. And who do you believe truly prevails when employees are split? Not their families, not them. That separation is used by the corporations to transfer blame and reduce expenses. Remember that this is no longer simply GM's nightmare. The manufacturer of Chrysler and Dodge, Stellantis, is facing 900 layoffs in Michigan and Indiana due to consumers refusing to pay $180,000. Volvo is planning to fire 1,000 employees in Pennsylvania and Virginia for trucks that were previously priced at $165. Nearly 90% of GM's automobiles are sent to the U.S. from its Korean plants, which are considering a total shutdown. It's beginning to resemble GM's withdrawal from Australia in 2017. According to one Ontario supplier, a customs paperwork blunder cost them $1.2 million in a single week. When it takes 3 crossings of the Mexican border for a basic piston, to become every border and truck are now subject to tariff risk, and the system begins to collapse. From here, where does GM go? 3 potential futures are currently being outlined by their planners. In the best situation, Brazilian wiring, harnesses and Mexican engines start flowing back by late June. Plants gradually rise again. At least production is still going on, even though margins remain extremely tight. The intermediate way appears more unsightly. New Japanese tariffs and Korean devices drive up prices even further. Plant utilization continues to decline. Credit. Bureaus begin to threaten downgrades. Then there's the worst-case situation. China stops supplying rare earth elements. Production of Altium batteries is totally stopped. For months or perhaps years, plants in the US and Canada go dark. This is what all of this really irritates me. Despite being marketed as a precision tool and a means of reviving American jobs, these tariffs have left thousands of families struggling to make ends meet and have left GM with a $5 billion budget hole. Furthermore, the politicians who made this pledge are nowhere to be found. Trump dismissed GM's issue, claiming that they had made their decisions. No genuine solutions, only political theater. While actual families endure hardships. Additionally, doesn't it feel as though we've already watched this film? Working people were left to bear the cost of lofty promises and unforeseen repercussions. I'll leave you with this then. Are American workers genuinely benefiting from these tariffs, or are they causing the auto industry to collapse? What would you do if you were in charge of GM at the moment? Would you make the difficult choices to preserve what's left, or would you accept the temporary suffering and hope for better? The question that keeps me up at night is this one. Is a new era of American industrial independence upon us? Or is an industry that helped create the middle class in America slowly collapsing? I'd like to talk to you. Leave a comment below with your opinions. Tell us what you observe on the ground if you work in the automotive sector or know someone who does.